Banished and Paralyzed, an Apache woman faced death, until one cowboy refused to let her die. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Nayeli opened her eyes. The cool air of the high desert brushed against her skin, and for a moment she felt the peace of her village, as if it were still around her. But that peace had long since vanished. She sat up slowly, wincing as pain traveled through her back and legs. Her body felt heavy, stiff, and untrustworthy. But she had been alone for days, and the silence of the wilderness pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it a sense of isolation she had never imagined she would face. But Nayeli had grown up in a close-knit Apache community. Her family had taught her the ways of the land, how to track animals, find edible plants, and read the signs in the clouds and earth. She had been proud of her skills, proud of her strength, and proud of the life she had known. She remembered her mother's gentle hands as they wove baskets, her father's steady voice as he taught her to aim with a bow, and the laughter of her younger brother as they ran through the open plains. Those memories were like fragile stars in a dark sky now, guiding her even as the cold wind gnawed at her hope. The events that had brought her to this point were sudden and cruel.
Conflict had erupted between her tribe and another group. Nayeli had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, accused of wrongdoing she had never committed.
The elders had spoken with heavy hearts, and the decision had been made. She was to be banished, to be sent away from everything she knew and loved, forced to survive alone. At first, she had tried to argue, to plead her innocence, but the voices of the council had been firm and unmoving. She had watched as her family and friends reluctantly turned away, their eyes filled with sorrow that mirrored the storm within her. She remembered walking away from the village with only a small pack carrying what little food and water she could manage. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a harsh and unyielding landscape that seemed to mock her vulnerability. For days she had traveled, her hands blistered from climbing rocks, her feet torn by sharp stones. The sun had scorched her during the day, and at night the cold had settled into her bones. Her stomach ached from hunger, her throat from thirst, and her heart from the loneliness that had become her only companion. She had thought she could endure it, as she had endured so much in her life. But nature had its own plans. It was on the third day, while she tried to find a small spring she had seen once from a distance, that disaster struck. Nayeli lost her footing on a steep incline. One moment she was steady, gripping the rocky ledge, and the next she was tumbling, hitting her back and legs with a force that stole her breath. Pain exploded through her body, sharp and relentless, and she realized with a sinking horror that she could not move her legs. Panic threatened to consume her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the dust on her skin. She whispered her name into the wind, not expecting an answer, not even hoping for one. The silence around her seemed to press in, suffocating and cruel. As the hours passed, Nayeli struggled to keep herself alive. She rationed the small amount of water she had, tried to shift herself into positions that were slightly less painful, and whispered words of encouragement to herself. She reminded herself that she had survived hardships before, that she had the strength to endure even this. But the wilderness showed no mercy. Birds circled high above, their cries distant and indifferent. Coyotes howled at night, and Nayeli shivered, her body aching, her spirit wavering. Thus, she thought of her family, of the warmth of her home, and a wave of grief washed over her. She had never felt so small, so powerless, so utterly alone. Despite her injuries, Nayeli refused to give up completely. She remembered the teachings of her mother, who had always said that the land could be both cruel and kind. The desert could take, but it could also provide, if one knew where to look. She tried to shift herself closer to a patch of desert grass, hoping to find roots or small plants to eat. Her hands scraped against rocks and sand, leaving her skin raw and bleeding. But her determination never faltered. Bah! She whispered to herself that she would survive, that she would not let this place take her life. The nights were the hardest, alone, in pain, and paralyzed. Nayeli faced not just the harshness of the wilderness, but the darkness within her own mind. She thought of giving up, of lying still and letting the wind carry her away. But each time she thought this, she remembered her father's voice, her mother's hands, her brother's laughter. She thought of the life she had yet to live, the moments she had yet to experience, and something inside her refused to surrender. She clung to life as a flame clings to air, fragile but determined. Days blended into nights, and Nayeli lost track of time. Hunger gnawed at her, thirst cracked her lips, and the pain in her legs and back never ceased. Yet in the midst of despair she found moments of reflection. She thought of the Apache stories, of the spirits of the land, of the teachings of her ancestors. She remembered lessons of courage, of resilience, of standing firm even when the world seemed to have abandoned you. These thoughts gave her a small burst of strength, enough to keep her eyes open, enough to make her whisper to herself that she would not die here, alone in the desert. On the 7th day, her strength was nearly gone. She could no longer lift herself to reach for food or water. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes felt heavy with exhaustion. She lay still, staring at the sky, wondering if anyone would ever find her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of hooves, faint but growing louder. Nayeli's heart raced.
Could it be a traveler? A rescuer?
She tried to lift her head to signal, but her arms trembled and failed her. All she could do was lie there, hoping that the person approaching would see her, that she would not be left to fade away unnoticed. As the sound of hooves grew nearer, Nayeli felt a flicker of hope. She whispered a quiet prayer to the spirits of the land, asking for mercy, for help, for a chance to live. She closed her eyes briefly, listening, waiting, praying that this could be the moment that changed everything. The desert which had been her prison might yet become the place of her salvation. Her mind clung to that hope, fragile and precious, like a small seed in the dry earth.
The sound of hooves grew louder across the desert plains, and Nayeli's heart beat faster than it had in days.
She tried to lift her head, tried to move her arms to signal, but her body refused to obey. Every movement sent sharp pain through her back and legs, a constant reminder of how vulnerable she was. She closed her eyes for a moment, wishing that whoever was approaching would see her and stop. The figure on horseback appeared over the crest of a small hill. A man dressed in a worn leather jacket and dusty hat rode slowly, scanning the terrain as if he were searching for something. Or someone.
Nayeli's pulse quickened.
She tried to shout, to call out, but her voice had grown hoarse from days of silence and fear. The cowboy's horse slowed as it neared the small patch of desert where she lay hidden, and he leaned forward, peering into the sunlit expanse. The cowboy was a man who had spent much of his life traveling the frontier. He had seen hardship, danger, and loneliness, and he knew that the land could be both beautiful and merciless. He had grown accustomed to helping travelers in need, to offering aid when it was possible and safe. But something about this place, this small, fragile figure lying on the ground, pulled at him in a way he could not ignore. He guided his horse closer, careful not to startle her. When Nayeli opened her eyes and saw the man, she felt a mixture of fear and hope. He was a stranger, a man from a world she did not know, and yet he seemed different from those who had caused her exile. His eyes held something gentle, something steady, something that promised he would not harm her. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that he could help, but her experience had taught her caution. She remained still, her body trembling, waiting to see what he would do. The cowboy dismounted carefully, keeping his horse close but steady. He approached her slowly, speaking in a calm, soft voice. Bing. "Hey there. Are you hurt?" His words were simple, but they carried a warmth that seemed almost impossible in the harsh desert. Nayeli tried to respond, but only a weak whisper escaped her lips. He knelt beside her, assessing her condition without touching her too roughly. He could see that she was badly injured, that her legs did not move, and that she had been alone for days. The cowboy's brow furrowed with concern. He searched his pack and found a small canteen of water. Holding it to her lips, he encouraged her to drink, helping her sip slowly. Best. Nayeli's body shook with weakness, but the water was a relief, quenching the thirst that had tormented her for days. The cowboy kept speaking softly, reassuring her that she was safe for the moment. He told her that he would not leave her, that he would help her find shelter and food.
Nayeli listened, her heart uncertain but desperate for help.
The first challenge was to move her. Nayeli could not sit up on her own, let alone walk. The cowboy improvised, using a blanket from his pack to gently lift her onto the horse. He made sure she was secure, adjusting the blanket so that she would not slip. The horse was calm and steady, trained to navigate the rough terrain without sudden movements. As he guided the horse forward, Nayeli felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. She was being carried by someone she did not know, but for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of safety. The journey was slow and difficult. The desert was unforgiving, and even a short distance required careful navigation. The cowboy encouraged her to rest, speaking quietly, telling her that she was strong and that she had survived so far. He told stories of his own travels, of places he had seen, and of people who had helped him in times of need. Nayeli listened, feeling her mind slowly shift from despair to cautious hope. She realized that she was not alone anymore. Someone had chosen to care for her, to risk his own safety to ensure she lived. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat pressed down on them. The cowboy found shade under a rocky outcrop and guided the horse there. He helped Nayeli drink more water, and he checked her injuries carefully. Her legs were paralyzed, her back bruised and sore, but she had no open wounds that could become infected. He treated the small scrapes and cuts with gentle care, using clean cloth from his pack to bandage them. Nayeli felt tears prick her eyes, not from pain, but from gratitude. She had feared death, feared the desert, feared being forgotten, and now she realized that someone had come for her. The cowboy did not rush her, understanding that recovery would take time. He spoke of finding a place where she could rest safely, where she could be fed and cared for. He promised that he would not abandon her, that she could trust him even if it felt impossible. Nayeli wanted to believe him, wanted to allow herself the hope she had denied for so long. She nodded weakly, trusting him in the only way she could, by staying alive and letting him guide her. The ride continued, slowly making its way toward a small valley the cowboy had seen earlier. He kept the horse steady, speaking softly to keep both Nayeli and the animal calm. He sang quiet songs of the frontier, stories of the land and its people, creating a rhythm that seemed to soothe the tension in the desert air. Nayeli listened, feeling a strange sense of peace despite the pain in her body. The cowboy's presence was like a shield, protecting her from the harshness of the wilderness and the despair that had threatened to consume her. Along the way, they encountered challenges. Loose rocks made the horse stumble, and sudden gusts of wind threatened to unbalance them. The cowboy held her steady, guiding the horse carefully, adjusting the blanket beneath her, whispering words of reassurance. despair. Naeli felt the weight of her own helplessness, but she also felt a growing trust in the man who refused to let her die. Every small movement, every careful step strengthened the bond forming between them. She realized that survival was no longer just about her own strength. It was about the partnership between her and this stranger who had risked so much to help her. At night, the cowboy made a small camp. He built a fire and kept the horse close, ensuring that Naeli was safe and warm. He spoke softly of the stars, telling her the stories he had learned from other travelers, from his own family, and from the land itself.
Naeli listened, feeling the darkness around her soften, feeling the fear and pain of the previous days ease slightly.
For the first time since her exile, she felt that she might have a future, that life could still be possible. He did not pressure her to move or speak more than she could. He simply stayed, offering comfort and protection, a steady presence in a world that had been cruel and unforgiving. Naeli realized that this was more than kindness. It was courage, determination, and moral strength. The cowboy had chosen to fight for her life, to see her survive when the desert had seemed ready to claim her. She felt a deep gratitude and a sense of connection that went beyond words. As dawn broke on the second day of their journey, Naeli felt a renewed determination. She had been rescued from the brink of death, but she also realized that recovery would not be easy. Her body was weak, her mind still haunted by fear and isolation, and the journey ahead was uncertain. Yet, with the cowboy at her side, she felt that she could face it. She understood that survival was not just a matter of endurance. It was about trust, about allowing another person to share the burden, and about finding hope even in the most desperate circumstances. The cowboy's actions spoke louder than any words. He carried her through the desert, treated her injuries with care, and spoke of hope and safety when despair had been her only companion. Naeli felt a quiet resolve grow inside her. She would live. She would not let the desert win. She would honor the courage of the man who refused to leave her behind, and perhaps one day she would find a way to repay the kindness that had saved her life. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and desert soil. Naeli lay carefully on the blanket that the cowboy had arranged on his horse, feeling the stiffness in her body after a restless night. Her muscles ached, and even the slightest movement sent sharp reminders of her injuries through her legs and back. Yet she felt the spark of hope she hadn't experienced in days. She had survived, and she was not alone. The cowboy had kept his promise. He had not left her side. He adjusted the blanket beneath her, making sure she was secure for the long journey ahead. His hands were steady and careful, each motion gentle and deliberate. He checked the horse's footing and the path ahead, choosing the safest route he could find. The desert could be unforgiving, and even a small misstep could prove dangerous for them both. Naeli watched him, feeling a mix of admiration and gratitude. She did not know his name yet, but she understood his courage and kindness in a way that words could not fully express. As they traveled through narrow canyons and over rocky slopes, Naeli marveled at the vastness of the land. But the mountains rose in the distance like silent guardians, their peaks painted by the early sun. The wind whispered through the canyon walls, carrying the scent of distant water and desert flowers. It was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Loose rocks threatened to topple the horse. Sudden drops could be deadly, and wild animals might appear without warning. The cowboy remained vigilant, scanning the terrain with careful eyes, speaking quietly to calm Naeli and the horse alike. She tried to speak, to thank him, but the words came out slowly and unevenly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but sincere. The cowboy glanced at her and nodded, a small smile breaking the seriousness of his face. "You don't have to thank me yet," he said gently. "Just stay strong." We've got a long way to go, but I'll keep you safe." His calm tone reassured her more than anything else. She nodded, drawing strength from his confidence, feeling a growing sense of trust that had seemed impossible just a few days before. As the hours passed, they faced challenge after challenge. The sun climbed higher, scorching the desert earth. Nayeli felt the heat on her exposed skin, and sweat dripped down her face. The cowboy offered her water at regular intervals, encouraging her to sip slowly to avoid dehydration. He shaded her from the harsh sunlight with a cloth from his pack, moving the horse to follow the patches of shade whenever possible. Despite her exhaustion, Nayeli could not help but notice the careful thought he put into every small detail. Every decision he made was meant to protect her and keep her alive. They encountered loose gravel on one of the steep slopes, and the horse stumbled slightly. Nayeli gasped, gripping the blanket tightly as the cowboy steadied the reins. "Phew," he whispered softly, speaking to both the horse and her, keeping their spirits calm. "Easy now. You're okay. Just a little more." Slowly, carefully, the horse regained balance, and they continued without further incident. Nayeli's heart pounded in her chest, but she also felt a renewed sense of courage. If they could survive even this, perhaps they could survive anything. At midday, the cowboy guided the horse to a small, shaded area beneath a rocky overhang. He helped Nayeli off carefully, arranging the blanket beneath her to relieve some pressure from her back and legs. He prepared a simple meal from dried meat and bread he carried in his pack, offering small bites to her. She ate slowly, grateful for the food, feeling some energy return to her body. The cowboy spoke quietly while she ate, telling her stories of the frontier, of rivers he had crossed, towns he had visited, and the people he had met along the way. Nayeli listened, letting the stories distract her from her pain and the uncertainty of her situation. They rested for a short while, then resumed their journey. The path grew more challenging as they entered a canyon filled with jagged rocks and narrow trails. The cowboy guided the horse carefully, making sure Nayeli remained balanced and secure. Every step required concentration, and Nayeli could feel the tension in the air. The desert had become a test of endurance, patience, and courage, but she felt stronger knowing she was not facing it alone. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and strong winds whipped through the canyon. Rain began to fall, and the rocky trail became slippery and treacherous. The cowboy did not panic. He led the horse to a sheltered area under a rock overhang, protecting Nayeli as best he could. He used extra blankets to shield her from the rain and held the horse steady with firm hands. Nayeli's teeth chattered from the cold, but she felt safe because he remained calm and in control. The storm lasted only a short time, but it left the canyon slick and dangerous. Despite the obstacles, their bond continued to grow. Nayeli realized that this man, who had appeared as a stranger, was becoming her lifeline. His courage and care gave her hope, and she began to speak more openly with him. She shared small stories from her life before the exile, memories of her family, her village, and the lessons her parents had taught her. The cowboy listened attentively, nodding and offering encouragement. He never judged her, never dismissed her fears, and never let her feel weak for needing help. Each conversation strengthened the trust between them, creating a connection that neither had expected in such a harsh place. Nightfall found them near a small creek. The cowboy helped Nayeli off the horse and guided her to the water. She drank slowly, feeling the coolness revive her weary body. The cowboy gathered firewood and built a small fire, using dry stones and branches he had collected. The warmth was comforting, and Nayeli felt a sense of peace she had not known since her banishment. She realized that even in the middle of the desert, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, she could feel safe and cared for. As they rested by the fire, the cowboy spoke of the importance of patience and persistence. He reminded Nayeli that healing and survival were not about speed, but about careful, steady effort. He told her that she had already shown great strength by enduring days alone in the wilderness, and that now, together, they could face whatever lay ahead. Narration. Nayeli listened, absorbing his words, and felt her own resolve grow. She would not give up, not while this man was by her side. She had survived so much already, and she knew she could continue to survive. Over the following days, the journey continued in much the same manner. The cowboy navigated the difficult terrain with skill and care, always watching for signs of danger and always putting Nayeli's safety first. They crossed small streams, climbed rocky paths, and traversed open plains. Nayeli began to notice small changes in her own body, slight improvements in circulation, small shifts in strength, and moments when her arms seemed less weak. Though her legs remained paralyzed, she felt a growing sense of life returning to her. Through it all, their bond deepened. Nayeli began to trust the cowboy not just for her survival, but for his honesty, courage, and kindness. She realized that he had saved her life in more ways than one, not just by providing physical aid, but by restoring her hope and belief in humanity. The desert, which had once seemed merciless and lonely, became a place where resilience and trust could grow. Thus, she learned to rely on him, to communicate her needs, and to face fear with courage, knowing she was not alone. Finally, after several challenging days, they reached a small plateau overlooking a distant valley. The cowboy pointed toward the horizon, showing her a cluster of trees and what appeared to be a river. "There's water and shelter down there," he said softly. Nayeli's heart lifted. For the first time since her banishment, she saw a glimpse of safety, of a place where she could rest and perhaps recover more fully. She smiled weakly, feeling a surge of hope she had almost forgotten. That night, under a sky full of stars, Nayeli reflected on everything that had happened. She had faced death, isolation, and fear. Yet, she was still alive. She had survived the desert because of her own strength and because of the courage of a stranger who refused to let her die. The cowboy had not only guided her through the wilderness, but had helped her rediscover her own resilience. She realized that survival was not just about endurance. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. The valley below stretched wide and green, a promise of life after the harshness of the desert. Nayeli felt a flutter of hope in her chest as the cowboy guided her horse carefully down the rocky slope. Her body was stiff, her back and legs ached, but she was determined to stay strong. Every movement was slow, every step calculated, but she trusted the man who had risked so much for her. He had become her lifeline, the reason she had survived, and now he was leading her to safety. The valley held a small settlement, a cluster of simple cabins, and a few fields tended by people who had learned to live close to the land. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of children playing reached their ears. Nayeli had almost forgotten what life among people sounded like. The laughter, the chatter, the sense of community. Her heart ached with longing and fear at the same time. Would these strangers help her, or would they turn her away like the world had before? The cowboy approached the nearest cabin and called out softly. A man and woman emerged, startled by the sight of a horse carrying a motionless passenger. "Please," the cowboy said quickly. "She is hurt. She needs help."
He explained everything as clearly and calmly as he could, how he had found her in the desert, how she had been alone and paralyzed, and how urgent her condition was.
The couple's eyes widened with concern. Without hesitation, they invited the cowboy to bring Nayeli inside. The inside of the cabin was warm and smelled of cooked food and fresh wood. Nayeli's eyes widened at the comfort, but she was too weak to move on her own. The cowboy guided her gently from the horse to a sturdy bed prepared with blankets. He adjusted her position carefully, making sure she was supported and comfortable. Breath. Nayeli felt tears welling up, not from pain, but from relief. She was safe, finally safe after days of fear, loneliness, and struggle. A healer in the settlement came to examine her. She was a kind woman, skilled in caring for injuries, and she treated Nayeli's back and legs with a gentle touch. Nayeli winced at the pain, but allowed herself to trust the healer's hands. The healer spoke softly to her, explaining that her body would take time to heal, that her legs might recover partially, and that strength would return slowly. Nayeli listened, feeling a mix of hope and frustration. She knew the path ahead would be long, but at least she was no longer alone in facing it. The cowboy stayed nearby, refusing to leave her side. He spoke quietly to Nayeli, telling her she had already shown incredible strength. He reminded her of the courage it had taken to survive in the desert, to endure hunger, thirst, and injury. "You are stronger than you think," he said, his voice steady and sincere. Nayeli wanted to believe him, and for the first time she felt the possibility that she could heal, that she could live a life beyond the desert.
Over the next days, Nayeli's routine became one of rest, care, and gradual recovery.
The healer worked with her, teaching exercises to prevent her muscles from weakening completely, while the cowboy helped in any way he could, fetching water, bringing food, and keeping her spirits high. Nayeli began to notice small improvements. She could move her arms more easily, lift her head without pain, and adjust her position on the bed. The smallest changes felt like victories, desperation. Each day she felt a little stronger, a little more alive. The cowboy also helped her emotionally. He would sit with her, telling stories of his travels, of people he had met, and of lessons he had learned along the way. Nayeli listened, laughing quietly at his humor, and sometimes sharing her own stories of the village she had left behind. They spoke of her family, her people, and the life she had lost and hoped to regain. In those conversations, Nayeli began to feel a connection she had not known since before her exile. A sense of belonging, of being cared for, of being seen as more than her injuries. One morning as the sun rose over the valley, Nayeli attempted to sit up on her own. The cowboy stayed close, ready to support her if she faltered. She felt the strain in her back and legs, but determination pushed her onward. Slowly, carefully, she raised herself. Pain shot through her body, but she did not give up. When she finally sat upright, she looked at the cowboy, and a small smile of triumph appeared on her face. He smiled back, pride shining in his eyes. It was a small step, but it was a victory that reminded her she could still fight for her life. In the following days, Nayeli continued to regain strength. The healer worked patiently with her, and the cowboy encouraged her every step of the way. She began to eat more, move more, and even laugh at times. The valley and the settlement became her new world, a place where safety and care replaced fear and danger. She realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship. It was about accepting help, trusting others, and allowing oneself to heal. The relationship between Nayeli and the cowboy deepened. She saw in him not just a rescuer but a friend, someone who had risked everything to save a life that the world had almost forgotten. They did not speak of love or romance. Their connection was something quieter, stronger. A bond formed in the fire of survival, trust, and shared experience. Nayeli felt gratitude that went beyond words. She knew she would never forget the man who had refused to let her die. As weeks passed, Nayeli began to help with small tasks around the settlement. She could reach, carry light objects, and assist with food preparation. Each task was a reminder of her growing independence and resilience. She felt pride in her progress, and the people in the settlement admired her determination. The cowboy continued to watch over her, always ready to support her but also encouraging her to try new things. Together they celebrated each small achievement as a victory over the despair that had threatened to overwhelm her. One afternoon, Nayeli and the cowboy walked together to the creek nearby. Though her legs still could not carry her fully, she felt the joy of movement, of feeling the earth beneath her hands and feet again. The water was cool and refreshing, and the sunlight sparkled on its surface. Bust. Nayeli laughed quietly as she dipped her hands into the stream, a sound that had been absent from her life for too long. The cowboy smiled, happy to see her regain not just her strength but her spirit. Nayeli's thoughts often returned to her family and her village. Bus. She wondered if they knew she had survived, if they worried about her, and if they would welcome her back someday. The cowboy listened patiently when she spoke of these memories, never judging, never offering empty reassurances. He simply reminded her that she had survived, that she was strong, and that the future was still open to her. Nayeli clung to these words, finding courage to imagine life beyond the valley, beyond her exile, beyond the fear that had consumed her. The days turned into weeks, and Nayeli's recovery became more visible. She could sit upright for longer periods, feed herself without help, and even move short distances with support. The healer praised her progress, the cowboy encouraged her constantly, and the settlement's people celebrated her resilience. Nayeli realized that survival was not just about enduring pain or hardship. It was about accepting care, finding hope in unexpected places, and allowing oneself to heal physically and emotionally. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in shades of gold and orange, Nayeli reflected on everything she had endured. She had faced death, loneliness, and fear, yet she had survived. She had been paralyzed, lost in the desert, abandoned by circumstances beyond her control, and yet she was alive. She had found hope, trust, and care in a stranger who refused to let her die. Nayeli understood that her survival was not just a matter of luck, but of courage, resilience, and the kindness of someone who believed in her when the world had not. The morning sun spilled golden light across the valley, illuminating the small settlement and the gentle flow of the creek nearby. Nayeli sat on the porch of the cabin, her back straighter than it had been in weeks. Her legs were still weak, but she could move with support, and each day brought small improvements that reminded her of her strength. She breathed in the crisp air, letting the warmth touch her skin, and for the first time in a long time she felt a sense of peace she had not known since before her exile. The cowboy was nearby, repairing the fence around the small field.
He glanced up at her, smiling, and waved. Nayeli waved back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest.
He had been her constant companion, her protector, and her guide through the wilderness, and now he remained her anchor in this new chapter of her life. Breath. She thought of everything he had done, the long journey through the desert, the nights spent keeping her safe, the endless patience he had shown as she struggled to regain strength. She realized that she owed him more than words could express, but she also knew that gratitude alone was not enough. She wanted to honor his courage by living fully, by reclaiming her life. The settlement had become a place of learning and growth for Nayeli. She helped with chores around the cabins, prepared meals, and assisted the healer with simple tasks. Each activity reminded her that she could still contribute, that she still had purpose, and that her spirit was not broken. The people around her treated her with respect and admiration, recognizing her resilience and determination. Nayeli felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced since leaving her tribe. The warmth of community, the laughter of children, and the kindness of strangers slowly began to fill the emptiness that exile had left behind. One day, the cowboy suggested they take a walk toward the river. Nayeli hesitated at first, unsure if she could manage the distance. He smiled gently, offering his arm for support. "We'll go slowly," he said. "Just a little at a time." She nodded, gripping his arm tightly as they moved together. Each step was a test of endurance, a reminder of the challenges she had faced, and a symbol of how far she had come. The journey was slow, but the rhythm of walking beside him, feeling the earth beneath her, brought a sense of liberation she had never thought possible.
As they reached the river, Nayeli marveled at the clear, sparkling water.
The gentle sound of the current flowing over rocks seemed to wash away the last remnants of fear and despair from her mind. She knelt by the riverbank, dipping her hands into the cool water, and felt a wave of gratitude for the simple pleasures of life. The cowboy stood nearby, watching with a quiet pride, knowing that this moment represented more than just physical recovery. It was a moment of emotional healing, a reconnection with the world and with herself. Nayeli began to speak more openly about her past. She shared stories of her family, her tribe, and the village she had been forced to leave behind. The cowboy listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging, always offering encouragement. Through these conversations, Nayeli found a sense of closure. She realized that while exile had taken much from her, it had also taught her resilience, courage, and the importance of human kindness. She began to envision a future where she could live fully, honoring her heritage while embracing the new life that had been offered to her. As her strength returned, Nayeli began to take on more responsibilities in the settlement. She taught children how to read signs in the land, how to recognize edible plants, and how to move carefully through the wilderness. Her knowledge, once confined to her tribe, became a gift to others. She felt pride in sharing her skills and stories, and the people around her admired her wisdom and courage.
Nayeli realized that survival was not just about endurance. It was about contributing, sharing, and making a difference in the lives of others.
The cowboy continued to support her, but he also encouraged her independence. He knew that true healing required her to reclaim control over her life. He offered guidance when needed, but he allowed her to make decisions, take risks, and embrace the challenges that came with recovery. Nayeli appreciated his balance of care and freedom, understanding that trust and respect were the foundation of their bond. She felt empowered, capable, and ready to face the world beyond the valley. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Nayeli and the cowboy sat together by the fire. The air was warm, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the gentle sounds of the valley at night. Nayeli reflected on everything she had endured: the exile, the desert, the paralysis, and the long journey of recovery. She realized that her life had been transformed not only by the hardships she faced, but by the unwavering courage and kindness of the cowboy. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and a renewed commitment to live fully. The cowboy spoke quietly, acknowledging her strength. "You've come so far," he said. "You survived when most would have given up. You've shown courage, patience, and resilience. You are remarkable." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. She wanted to express her gratitude, her respect, and her admiration, but words felt insufficient. Instead, she simply nodded, feeling the depth of their connection in silence. As weeks turned into months, Nayeli's progress continued. She could move with less assistance, perform tasks independently, and even explore the surrounding area. Her confidence grew, and with it, her sense of purpose. She began to think about returning to her tribe, about reconnecting with her family and sharing the story of her survival. She wanted to honor the life she had been given, to show that courage and perseverance could overcome even the greatest obstacles. The settlement celebrated her achievements. The people admired her resilience, her intelligence, and her courage. Nayeli had become a symbol of hope, a living reminder that even in the face of despair, life could be reclaimed. She taught others not just survival skills, but also the importance of compassion, courage, and trust. Her experiences, once a source of fear and pain, became lessons she shared with those around her, inspiring them to face their own challenges with determination and heart. One morning, Nayeli and the cowboy prepared for a journey to visit her village. She had made the decision to return, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to reconnect with her past and honor the people she loved. Bah. The cowboy offered to accompany her, not as a protector, but as a companion, sharing in the journey and supporting her as she faced the next chapter of her life. Nayeli felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that her reunion with her tribe would be both emotional and meaningful. The journey back was filled with reflection. Nayeli thought of everything she had endured: the exile, the desert, the paralysis, and the recovery. She realized that she had been given a second chance, a life renewed through courage, resilience, and the kindness of another human being.
She felt gratitude not only for her survival, but also for the lessons she had learned, the importance of trust, the strength of the human spirit, and the power of compassion. When she finally arrived at her village, Nayeli was greeted with tears, hugs, and questions from her family and friends. They had feared the worst, and seeing her alive and recovering filled them with joy. Nayeli shared her story, carefully recounting the days in the desert, the struggle to survive, and the cowboy who had refused to let her die. Her people listened in awe, amazed by her courage and the remarkable bond she had formed with someone outside their world. The cowboy was welcomed as well, not as an outsider, but as a hero who had saved a life and restored hope. Nayeli introduced him to her family, expressing her gratitude in the simplest and most heartfelt way, through her words, her actions, and the life she had rebuilt. The village celebrated not only her survival but also the lessons of courage, trust, and human kindness that she brought with her. Nayeli's journey had transformed her.
She had faced death and despair, endured betrayal and exile, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had learned that survival was not just about physical strength, but also about trust, hope, and the courage to accept help when it was needed most. She had found a new family in the settlement, a steadfast friend in the cowboy, and a renewed connection with her tribe. In the years that followed, Nayeli became a teacher and a guide, sharing her knowledge and experiences with others. She taught the children of her tribe and the settlement alike about survival, courage, and the importance of compassion. Her story spread, inspiring those who heard it to believe in their own strength and the power of human kindness. She lived a life filled with purpose, honor, and gratitude, carrying the lessons of the desert and the gift of a life saved by a single, determined man. Nayeli never forgot the cowboy who had refused to let her die. She remembered his courage, patience, and unwavering care. She honored him not only through words, but through the life she rebuilt, the hope she shared, and the strength she demonstrated. Together they had faced the wilderness, battled despair, and emerged stronger. Their bond remained unspoken but deeply understood, a connection forged in survival and compassion that neither time nor distance could erase.